Queen Zarathul stood on the bridge of her massive warship, the Crimson Talon. Her purple skin gleamed under the red lights of the command center. Four arms moved gracefully as she checked the ship's status reports. She was the ruler of the Valeth Empire, and her people feared her across the galaxy. The Queen's most prized possession was not gold or jewels. It was Korath, an ancient star dragon that lived in the special chamber below the ship. The creature was 200 feet long, with scales that shimmered like distant stars. She had captured the dragon 30 years ago and kept it under her control with a special collar around its neck. The Valeth people believed they were the strongest race in the galaxy. They had conquered many worlds and enslaved weaker species. Humans were among those they looked down upon the most. To the Valeth, humans were nothing more than primitive scavengers who barely knew how to use tools properly. Commander Vex, the Queen's most trusted advisor, approached her with worry in his eyes. His own purple skin looked pale under the ship's lights. "My Queen, we have a serious problem with the main engine." Queen Zarathul turned to face him. Her golden eyes narrowed. "What kind of problem?" "The exotic matter drive is failing. Our engineers cannot fix it. The containment field keeps getting weaker. If it breaks completely, we will be stuck here in enemy space." The Queen's four hands clenched into fists. They were traveling through a dangerous part of space, far from any friendly ports. Enemy ships patrolled this area regularly. Being stuck here would mean certain death for everyone on board. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Maybe 6 hours before." "The drive shuts down completely," Vex replied. "Our best engineers have been working on it for 3 hours already. They say they have never seen anything like this before." The Queen walked to the large window that looked out into space. Stars twinkled in the distance, but they seemed cold and unfriendly now. Her ship carried 3,000 crew members and her precious dragon. She could not let them all die because of a broken engine. "What about the backup systems?" she asked. "The backup drive is not powerful enough to move a ship this size. It would take us 50 years to reach the nearest friendly planet." Deep in the ship's lower levels, Korath the dragon began to stir. The ancient creature had been sleeping, but something was wrong. The ship's vibrations had changed. The steady hum of the engines was becoming irregular. Dragons were sensitive to such things, and Korath could feel the ship's distress. The dragon raised its massive head and looked around the chamber. The psychic control collar around its neck glowed with a soft blue light. This collar had kept the dragon obedient for 30 years, but now something felt different. The dragon's instincts were warning of danger. Back on the bridge, more bad news arrived. A young officer ran up to the Queen with a tablet in his hands. "My Queen, the engine room reports that the exotic matter is becoming unstable. If we cannot fix it soon, there might be an explosion." Queen Zarathul felt fear creep into her heart, though she would never show it. An explosion would not just destroy the ship. It would tear a hole in space itself, creating a dangerous rift that could swallow nearby planets. "Have our engineers tried everything?" she asked. "Yes, my Queen. They have used every technique they know. The problem is too complex for them too." "Understand." Commander Vex stepped forward. He looked uncomfortable, as if he wanted to suggest something but was afraid to speak. "What is it, Vex? Speak freely." "My Queen, we have some prisoners in the holding cells. They were captured from the human mining colony we raided last week. One of them claims to be a mechanic." The Queen's face twisted with disgust. "A human mechanic? You think a primitive human can fix what our advanced engineers cannot?" "I know it sounds crazy, my Queen, but we are running out of options. If we do nothing, we will all die anyway." "Queen." Zarathul thought about this. Her pride told her that humans were worthless, but her survival instincts were stronger than her pride. She had not lived this long by being stubborn when death was near. "What is this human's name?" "Jake Morrison. He worked on the atmospheric processors at the mining colony. He fixed machines that kept the colonists alive." The Queen paced back and forth. Each step echoed in the quiet bridge. All around her, crew members waited for her decision. The ship shuddered slightly as the engines struggled to maintain power. Down. In the dragon's chamber, Korath became more restless. The great creature's tail swished back and forth, hitting the walls with loud bangs. The dragon's handlers looked worried. They had never seen Korath act this way before. "My queen," another officer reported, "the dragon is becoming agitated. It seems to sense something is wrong." This made the queen's decision easier. If her dragon was worried, then the situation was truly desperate. Dragons had instincts that went back millions of years. They could sense danger in ways that even advanced technology could not. "Bring the human to me," she ordered. "But keep him under heavy guard. I want to see what this primitive creature thinks he can do." Commander Vex nodded and left the bridge. Quickly, the queen watched him go, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. Her whole life had been built on the belief that the Velith were superior to all other races. Now she was about to ask a human for help. The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. Red warning lights began flashing throughout the bridge. The exotic matter drive was getting worse, and time was running out. Queen Zarathul looked out at the stars one more time. Somewhere out there, enemy ships were hunting for her. If the engines failed, they would find her ship floating helplessly in space. The thought of being captured by her enemies was worse than death. She had ruled the Velith Empire for 40 years. She had conquered worlds and commanded fleets. But now her fate might depend on a human mechanic named Jake Morrison. The irony was not lost on her, and it filled her with both anger and desperate hope. Jake Morrison woke up when the guards banged on his cell door. The sound echoed through the dark prison block where he had been kept for a week. His hands were still dirty from the last job he had done before the aliens captured his mining colony. "Get up, human," one of the guards said in broken English. "The queen wants to see you." Jake stood up slowly. He was a tall man with brown hair and calloused hands. His clothes were the same work uniform he had worn at the mining colony. The blue shirt had his name patch on it, though it was now torn and dirty. The guards put energy shackles around his wrists. The metal was cold against his skin, and he could feel the power humming through it. These aliens took no chances with their prisoners. They walked through the ship's corridors for what felt like miles. Jake had never seen anything like this place. The walls were made of some kind of metal that seemed to glow from within. Strange symbols covered every surface, and the air smelled like ozone and something else he could not identify, other alien. Crew members stopped to stare at him as he passed. Most of them had never seen a human up close. To them, he was just another primitive creature from a backward world. Jake could see the disgust in their golden eyes. The engineering section was massive. Pipes and conduits ran along the walls and ceiling like metal veins. The air was hot and humid, and Jake could hear the sound of machinery working hard. Several alien engineers stood around a huge device in the center of the room. Chief Engineer Kalth approached Jake with obvious reluctance. He was shorter than the other aliens, with darker purple skin and 3 eyes instead of the usual 2. His forearms moved nervously as he spoke. "Human, our exotic matter drive is failing. The containment field cannot hold the energy stable. We have tried everything, but nothing works." Jake looked at the device. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, but he could tell it was some kind of engine. The whole thing was vibrating in a way that reminded him of an overloaded generator back at the mining colony. "Can you show me what is happening?" Jake asked. Kalth led him to a control panel covered with lights and displays. The alien explained how the exotic matter was supposed to work, but Jake only understood about half of it. The technology was far beyond anything humans had built. "The exotic matter creates energy by existing in 2 dimensions at once," Kalth said. "But something is making it unstable. The particles keep jumping between dimensions too quickly." Jake studied the readings on the display. The numbers meant nothing to him, but the patterns looked familiar. He had seen similar problems with the atmospheric processors at the mining colony. "What happens if you slow down the energy flow?" he asked. Kalth looked insulted. "We are not children, human." "Of course we tried that. It makes the problem worse." "What about pressure release?" "Pressure release? This is not a steam engine, primitive creature. This is exotic matter containment. Jake walked around the device, looking at it from different angles. The alien engineers watched him with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. They whispered to each other in their own language, probably making jokes about the stupid human, but Jake was not stupid. He had fixed machines his whole life. He knew that all engines, no matter how advanced, followed basic rules. Energy needed to flow, pressure needed to be released, heat needed to be controlled. Your exotic matter, Jake said slowly. It exists in 2 dimensions at once, right? Yes, as I already explained. But what if it needs to breathe? The aliens looked at each other with confusion. Breathe? It is not alive, human. No, but it is moving between dimensions. Maybe it needs space to move, like a piston in an engine. Jake pointed to a section of the device where several pipes came together. This part here looks like it is trying to expand, but something is holding it back. Calth examined the area Jake was pointing to. That is the dimensional anchor. It keeps the exotic matter from escaping into normal space. What if you give it a little more room? Not enough to escape, but enough to move naturally? That is impossible. The calculations show that any change in the anchor field would cause a cascade failure. Jake rubbed his chin with his shackled hands. Your calculations assume the exotic matter wants to escape, but what if it just wants to move? Like a fish swimming in water? The idea was so simple that none of the alien engineers had considered it. They were focused on containing the exotic matter, not understanding its natural behavior. This is ridiculous, Calth said. We cannot risk the entire ship based on a human's ignorant guess. But Jake was already looking around the engineering bay. He spotted a pile of scrap metal in one corner. Can I borrow some tools? Absolutely not. Guards, take this human back to his cell. At that moment, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms began blaring throughout the engineering section. The exotic matter drive was getting worse, and everyone could feel it. Chief Engineer Calth looked at his instruments with growing panic. The containment field is down to 30%. We have maybe 2 hours before complete failure. Jake stepped forward. Look, I know you think I am just a primitive human, but I have been fixing machines since I was 12 years old. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones. The alien engineers argued among themselves in their own language. Jake could not understand the words, but he could tell they were desperate. Finally, Calth turned back to him. If you are wrong, human, you will die with the rest of us. If I am right, we all live. Seems like a fair trade. Calth hesitated for a moment, then nodded to one of his assistants. Give him basic tools. But watch him carefully. Jake selected a few simple tools from the alien kit. They were designed for 4-armed users, but he could make them work. He approached the dimensional anchor assembly and began to carefully loosen some of the connections. What are you doing? Calth demanded. Giving your exotic matter room to breathe, Jake replied. Just a little bit. Not enough to escape, but enough to move naturally. The alien engineers watched in horror as Jake made small adjustments to their carefully calibrated system. To them, it looked like he was destroying their most advanced technology with primitive methods, but Jake knew what he was doing. He had learned long ago that machines had personalities. You had to listen to them, feel their rhythms, understand what they needed. This exotic matter engine was no different from any other machine he had fixed. Slowly, carefully, Jake created a small expansion chamber in the dimensional anchor system. It was nothing fancy, just a simple pressure release valve made from scrap metal. But it gave the exotic matter a place to expand and contract naturally. The moment he connected the valve, the ship's vibrations changed. The harsh grinding noise from the engine became a smooth hum. The lights on the control panel shifted from red to yellow to green. Calth stared at his instruments in disbelief. The containment field is stabilizing. How is this possible? Jake wiped his hands on his shirt. Sometimes the best solutions are the simplest ones. Your exotic matter did not want to escape. It just wanted to move naturally. The engineering bay fell silent except for the steady hum of the now stable engine. The alien engineers looked at Jake with new eyes. This primitive human had solved their greatest crisis with nothing but scrap metal and basic tools. Deep in the ship, Korath. The dragon felt the change immediately. The irregular vibrations that had been bothering the ancient creature were gone. The ship felt stable again, safe again. But something else had changed too. The dragon's sensitive instincts detected a new presence on the ship, someone who understood the natural order of things. For the first time in 30 years, Korath was curious about a being other than itself. News of Jake's success spread through the ship like wildfire. Crew members who had never given humans a second thought now whispered about the primitive mechanic who had saved them all. Some were amazed, others were confused, but all of them were alive because of what Jake had done. Queen Zarathil sat in her private chamber, staring at the report Commander Vex had brought her. The numbers were clear. The exotic matter drive was running better than it had in months. The human had not just fixed the problem, he had somehow improved the entire system. "Bring him to me," she ordered. Jake was escorted to the Queen's audience chamber under heavy guard. The room was enormous, with high ceilings and walls covered in battle trophies from conquered worlds. At the center sat Queen Zarathil on a throne. Made from black metal and red crystals, she studied Jake with her golden eyes, trying to understand how this ordinary-looking human had accomplished what her best engineers could not. His clothes were still dirty from working on the engine, and his hands showed the calluses of someone who had worked with tools his entire life. "Explain to me how you fixed our engine," she said. Jake looked around the impressive room before answering. "Your exotic matter was like a caged animal. It needed room to move naturally. Your engineers were trying to control it too much instead of working with it. My engineers have studied exotic matter theory for decades. They understand the science better than any human could." "Maybe," Jake said. "But sometimes understanding how something works is not the same as understanding what it needs." The Queen leaned forward in her throne. "What do you mean?" "I have fixed a lot of machines in my life. Engines, generators, life support systems, they all have one thing in common. They work best when you respect what they are trying to do naturally." Queen Zarathil felt frustrated by his simple answers. This human was talking about advanced technology as if it were no different from a primitive combustion engine. Yet the results spoke for themselves. "Your engineers knew all the theory," Jake continued, "but they forgot that even exotic matter follows basic rules. It needs space to move, pressure to release, balance to maintain. These are not alien concepts. They are universal." Before the Queen could respond, Commander Vex entered the chamber with an urgent expression. "My Queen, we have a problem with Korath." The dragon had been acting strangely since the engine was fixed. Instead of sleeping as it usually did, Korath had been moving around its chamber restlessly. The creature had also stopped eating, which was dangerous for something so large. "What kind of problem?" the Queen asked. "The dragon refuses to eat. It has been 3 days since its last meal. The handlers are worried it might be getting sick." Jake listened to this conversation with growing interest. "What kind of dragon is Korath?" Queen Zarathil looked at him with surprise. "You know about star dragons? I have heard stories. They supposed to be very intelligent, right? Almost like people in some ways. Korath is my prized possession. I captured it 30 years ago and have kept it under control ever since. It has never shown any defiance before." Jake thought about this. Maybe it is not defiance. Maybe it is trying to tell you something. "Dragons do not communicate with lesser beings," the Queen said coldly. "With respect, Your Majesty, maybe you have never tried to listen." The Queen's 4 hands gripped the arms of her throne. This human was challenging everything she believed about the natural order. First he had fixed her engines with primitive methods, now he was suggesting that her dragon was trying to communicate. "I want to see this dragon," Jake said. The request was so bold that Commander Vex stepped forward, ready to order the guards to remove Jake from the chamber. But Queen Zarathil held up one hand to stop him. "You want to see Korath? Do you have any idea how dangerous that creature is?" "I have worked with dangerous equipment my whole life," Jake replied. The key is to understand what you are dealing with and show proper respect. The queen studied Jake's face, looking for signs of fear or deception. She found neither. This human seemed genuinely curious about her dragon, not afraid of it. "Very well," she said finally. "But you will be under heavy guard, and any sudden movements will result in your immediate death." They traveled deep into the ship, down corridors that few crew members ever saw. The air grew warmer as they descended, and Jake could hear a low, rumbling sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The dragon's chamber was vast, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above. Korath lay in the center of the room, its massive form coiled like a sleeping mountain. The creature's scales shimmered with patterns that reminded Jake of distant galaxies. Dot around the dragon's neck was a collar made of some kind of blue metal. It glowed with a soft light that pulsed in rhythm with Korath's breathing. Jake could tell immediately that this was the control device the queen used to keep the dragon obedient. "Magnificent," Jake whispered. Queen Zarathul watched him carefully. "It is a weapon, human, not a pet to be admired." "No," Jake said softly. "It is a living being. Look at its eyes." Korath had raised its enormous head when they entered the chamber. The dragon's eyes were ancient and intelligent, filled with a wisdom that came from centuries of life. But Jake could also see something else in those eyes: sadness. "It is sad," he said. "Dragons do not feel sadness," the queen replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Jake stepped closer to the dragon, ignoring the worried sounds from the guards. "Hello, Korath, I am Jake." The dragon's massive head turned toward him, and Jake felt the weight of that ancient gaze. For a moment, human and dragon studied each other across the vast difference in their species. "I know what it is like to be far from home," Jake said quietly. "I know what it is like to be controlled by others." Korath's eyes seemed to brighten with understanding. The dragon lowered its great head until it was only a few feet from Jake. The guards raised their weapons, but Queen Zarathul motioned for them to wait. Jake slowly reached out his hand and placed it on the dragon's snout. The scales were warm to the touch, and he could feel the powerful life force beneath them. Korath's eyes closed for a moment, as if the dragon was savoring this simple contact. Then something happened that shocked everyone in the chamber. Korath, the ancient star dragon that had been the queen's symbol of power for 30 years, lowered its head even further in a gesture of respect and acknowledgement. The dragon was bowing to Jake. Queen Zarathul stepped backward, her four hands trembling with disbelief. "This is impossible. Korath has never shown respect to anyone but me, and only because of the control collar." Jake kept his hand on the dragon's snout, feeling a connection that went beyond words. "I think Korath recognizes something in me. Maybe it is because I understand what it means to be controlled by others." The dragon's eyes opened again, and Jake saw intelligence there that rivaled any human's. This was not just an animal or a weapon. This was a being with thoughts and feelings, hopes and dreams. "You are keeping it prisoner," Jake said, turning to face the queen. "That collar around its neck is not just controlling its actions, it is hurting it." "A collar is necessary to maintain control," the queen replied, but her voice was uncertain. "Is it? Or is it just making both of you weaker?" Jake looked back at Korath, and the dragon's eyes seemed to convey a message. The creature was tired, not just physically, but spiritually. It had been a prisoner for so long that it had almost forgotten what freedom felt like. "Your Majesty," Jake said carefully, "I think Korath stopped eating because it sensed something changing on the ship. When I fixed the engine, I did it by understanding what the exotic matter needed naturally. Maybe Korath is trying to tell you what it needs naturally." The queen looked at her dragon with new eyes. For 30 years, she had seen Korath as a symbol of her power, a weapon to be deployed against her enemies. But now she was beginning to wonder if she had been missing something important. "What do you think it needs?" she asked. Jake smiled. "The same thing we all need. Respect, understanding, and maybe a little bit of freedom." The dragon's tail moved slightly, creating a sound like distant thunder. But it was not a threatening gesture. It was more like a sigh of hope. Queen Zarathul could not sleep. She lay in her private chambers, staring at the ceiling while her mind raced with troubling thoughts. The image of Kareth bowing to Jake Morrison kept replaying in her memory. In 40 years of ruling the Valeth Empire, she had never seen anything like it. The dragon had been the foundation of her power. Other alien races feared her because she commanded a star dragon. Her own people respected her because she had captured such a magnificent creature. But now that same dragon had shown respect to a human prisoner. She rose from her bed and walked to the large window that looked out into space. The stars seemed different now, less like distant conquests and more like mysteries she had never bothered to understand. Commander Vex entered her chamber after requesting permission. His face showed the same confusion that had been plaguing the entire ship since Jake's encounter with Kareth. My queen, I have called the War Council as you requested. They are waiting in the strategy room. The queen nodded and followed him through the corridors. Word of what had happened in the dragon's chamber had spread throughout the ship despite her orders for secrecy. Crew members whispered in the hallways, and she could see questions in their eyes. The War Council consisted of her most trusted advisors. General Fax commanded her ground forces, Admiral Crows led the space fleet, and Chief Scientist Yeln oversaw all research projects. These three had served her for decades, and their loyalty was absolute. You have all heard about the incident with Kareth, she began. Yes, my queen, General Fax replied. The reports are difficult to believe. A star dragon showing respect to a human prisoner goes against everything we understand about the natural order. Perhaps the reports are exaggerated, Admiral Crow suggested. Dragons are unpredictable creatures. Maybe it was just curious about the human scent. Chief Scientist Yeln shook his head. I have studied the security footage. The dragon's behavior was clearly a gesture of respect and acknowledgement. There is no other explanation. Queen Zarathul sat down at the head of the council table. The question is what this means for our empire. If a human can earn a dragon's respect, what does that say about our beliefs regarding human inferiority? The room fell silent. This was the question that had been haunting all of them. The Valeth Empire was built on the idea that they were the superior race in the galaxy. They had conquered other worlds because they believed it was their right to rule over lesser beings. My queen, General Fax said carefully, perhaps we should consider the possibility that this human is unusual. Not all humans are the same. This Jake Morrison might be exceptional among his kind. That is what I thought at first, the queen replied. But then I began to think about what he accomplished. He fixed our exotic matter drive using simple tools and basic principles. Our best engineers could not solve the problem, but he did it in a few hours. Human technology is primitive, Admiral Crow said. They barely understand the basics of space travel. How could one of them comprehend our advanced systems? Maybe that is exactly why he could fix it, Chief Scientist Yeln suggested. Our engineers were thinking in complex terms, but the solution was simple. Sometimes a fresh perspective can reveal things that expertise cannot see. Queen Zarathul looked around the table at her advisors. I have been thinking about this for days. What if we have been wrong about humans? What if they have abilities we have not recognized? The suggestion was shocking. For generations, the Valeth had considered themselves the pinnacle of galactic civilization. They had never questioned their superiority over other races. With respect, my queen, General Thax said, we have conquered dozens of human worlds. We have seen their technology and their military capabilities. They are clearly inferior to us in every way. Are they? The queen asked. Or are they just different? This Jake Morrison showed qualities that none of our people demonstrated. He approached our problems with curiosity instead of fear. He treated Kareth with respect instead of trying to dominate it. Respect is weakness, Admiral Crow said firmly. We rule through strength and fear. It has worked for centuries. Has it? Queen Zarathul stood up and walked to the window. Look at our empire. We control many worlds, but we have no allies. Other races obey us because they fear us, not because they respect us. We are surrounded by enemies who would destroy us if they could. Chief Scientist Yeln leaned forward. What are you suggesting, my queen? I am suggesting that maybe there is another way to build power. Jake Morrison earned Korath's respect without threats or violence. He simply understood what the dragon needed and provided it. The council members exchanged worried glances. Their queen was talking about ideas that challenged everything they believed about leadership and power. "My queen," General Thax said, "if you are considering releasing the human, I must advise against it. He has seen too much of our ship's capabilities. He could provide valuable intelligence to our enemies. What if we offered him a position instead?" The queen asked. "What if we asked him to help us understand things we have missed? A human advisor?" Admiral Crows looked horrified. "My queen, the other races would see this as a sign of weakness. They would think we are becoming soft. Or they might see it as a sign of wisdom," Chief Scientist Yelm said thoughtfully. "If we can learn from other species, we might become even stronger." Queen Zarathil turned back to face her council. "I want to know more about this human. Commander Vex, I want you to have extended conversations with him. Find out how he thinks, what he believes, what he values." "Yes, my queen," Vex replied, though he looked uncertain. "And I want to know more about his species. Chief Scientist Yelm, I want you to research human culture and history. Not just their military capabilities, but their philosophy, their art, their way of looking at the universe." "Of course, my queen." General Thax stood up. "My queen, I feel I must speak plainly. You're talking about making fundamental changes to our empire based on one encounter with one human. This seems very risky." "Everything worthwhile is risky," the queen replied. "We have been following the same path for centuries. We conquer. We rule through fear. We treat other races as inferior. But what has this brought us? We have power, but we have no peace. We have territory, but we have no true allies." She walked back to the table and placed her 4 hands on its surface. "I have been thinking about something Jake Morrison said. He told me that sometimes understanding how something works is not the same as understanding what it needs. Maybe we understand how to conquer other races, but we do not understand what our empire really needs." "What do you think it needs?" Admiral Crows asked. "I think it needs to learn. I think it needs to grow. I think it needs to become something more than just a collection of conquered worlds held together by fear." The queen looked around the table at her advisors. "I am not saying we should abandon our strength, but maybe we should add wisdom to our strength. Maybe we should learn from others instead of just dominating them." Chief Scientist Yelm nodded. Slowly, "It is an interesting idea, my queen. Many of our greatest advances have come from studying other species' technologies. Perhaps we could learn from their social structures as well." "This is madness," General Thax said firmly. "We are the Valeth Empire. We are the strongest race in the galaxy. We do not need to learn from inferior species." "Then explain to me how an inferior species fixed our most advanced technology," the queen replied. "Explain to me how an inferior species earned the respect of a star dragon." General Thax had no answer for that. Queen Zarethel dismissed the council and returned to her chambers. She had much to think about. Her entire worldview was being challenged by a simple human mechanic who had shown kindness to her dragon dot as she looked out at the stars. She wondered what other surprises the universe might hold. For the first time in her life, she was more curious than certain, and that feeling was both terrifying and exciting. Meanwhile, in the dragon's chamber, Korath lay quietly but alert. The ancient creature could sense the changes happening throughout. The ship, the humans called it intuition, but dragons called it wisdom. Something important was beginning, and Korath was eager to see what would come next. In his cell, Jake Morrison sat on his simple bed, unaware that his actions had set in motion changes that would reshape an empire. He was thinking about Dragon's eyes and the sadness he had seen there. Tomorrow, he hoped he might be able to help Korath feel a little less alone. The attack came without warning. Red lights flashed throughout the Crimson Talon as enemy ships appeared on the sensors. The bridge erupted in controlled chaos as crew members rushed to battle stations. "Report!" Queen Zarethel commanded as she strode onto the bridge. "Scareth battle fleet, my queen," Commander Vex replied. 12 ships, including 2 heavy cruisers. They have us surrounded. The Queen's golden eyes narrowed. The Scarith were old enemies of the Valith Empire. They were a warrior race that prided themselves on their cruelty and their advanced weapons. If they had found her ship in this remote system, it was no accident. How did they know we were here? She asked. Unknown, my queen. But they are demanding our surrender. They want the ship and... He paused, looking uncomfortable. And what? And they want Korath. They have been hunting for a star dragon for decades. They plan to use it as a weapon against us. Queen Zarathil felt cold fury rise in her chest. The thought of her enemies capturing Korath filled her with rage, but she also felt something else, something new. She felt protective of the dragon, not just as a symbol of power, but as a living being that deserved better. Open fire, she ordered. The battle began with a thunderous exchange of energy. Weapons. The Crimson Talon's shields flared as enemy fire struck them. The ship shuddered under the impact, and sparks flew from damaged control panels. Shields down to 60%, an officer reported. Return fire with all weapons, the Queen commanded. The Valith ship fought back with everything it had, but the enemy had superior numbers. For every shot the Crimson Talon landed, 3 came back in return. The Queen watched grimly as her ship took damage. My queen, Commander Vex said urgently, our main weapons are failing. We cannot win this battle with conventional tactics. At that moment, Jake Morrison appeared on the bridge under guard. Commander Vex had brought him at the Queen's earlier request to serve as an advisor. The human looked around at the chaos with calm eyes. What is the situation? Jake asked. We are outgunned and outnumbered, the Queen replied. The enemy wants to capture this ship and take Korath as a prize. Jake studied the tactical display, trying to understand the battle. What about your dragon? Can it help fight? Korath is controlled by the psychic collar? It can only do what I command it to do, but in space combat, dragons are limited. They are powerful, but they cannot match modern weapons. What if you remove the collar? The question sent shock waves through the bridge. Every officer turned to stare at Jake with disbelief. Remove the collar? Queen Zarathil looked at him as if he had suggested cutting off her own arms. Without the collar, Korath would be free. It might turn against us. It might flee and leave? US to die. Or it might fight to protect the ship that has been its home for 30 years, Jake replied. You said dragons are intelligent. Korath knows this ship better than anyone. It knows the crew, even if they have kept it prisoner. Another impact shook the ship. The lights flickered and more damage reports came in. Shields down to 30%, an officer called out. My queen, General Thax's voice came over the communication system from the lower decks. We are losing this battle. We need to consider evacuation. Queen Zarathil looked at the tactical display. The enemy ships were closing in, and her own vessel was taking heavy damage. In a few more minutes, the shields would fail completely. Jake, she said quietly, if I remove that collar and Korath chooses to abandon us, we will all die. If you keep the collar on and we lose this battle, Korath will become a slave to your enemies, Jake replied. At least this way, the dragon gets to choose its own fate. The Queen thought about her conversation with the War Council. She had talked about earning respect instead of demanding obedience. She had wondered what her empire might become if it was built on something other than fear. Now she had a chance to find out. Commander Vex, escort me to the dragon's chamber, she ordered. My queen in the middle of a battle? Especially in the middle of a battle. They made their way through the ship as it continued to shake from enemy fire. Emergency lights cast red shadows on the walls, and the sound of damage control teams echoed through the corridors. In the dragon's chamber, Korath was agitated. The ancient creature could sense the danger to the ship, and its instincts were telling it to fight. But the collar held it in place, forcing it to remain passive while its home was under attack. Queen Zarathil approached the dragon with Jake beside her. Korath's massive eyes focused on them, and the queen could see frustration and anger in that ancient gaze. Korath, she said softly, I am going to remove your collar. You will be free to choose your own path. You can leave this ship and find a new life among the stars, or you can stay and help us fight." Jake placed his hand on the dragon's snout again. "Whatever you choose, we will respect your decision." The queen reached up and touched the control device on her belt. The psychic collar around Korath's neck had been her source of power for 30 years. With one command, she could remove it and give up that control. Forever, she pressed the button. The collar fell away from Korath's neck with a soft clang. For the first time in 3 decades, the Star Dragon was free. Korath raised its massive head and let out a roar that shook the entire chamber. It was not a roar of anger, but of joy and freedom. The dragon's scales began to glow with their natural starlight, something the collar had suppressed for years. The dragon looked down at Queen Zarathul and Jake. Then, to everyone's amazement, Korath lowered its head in a gesture of respect to both of them. "You freed me," the dragon's voice echoed. In their minds. For the first time, Korath was able to communicate without the collar's interference. "After 30 years, you chose to trust me. What will you do?" the queen asked. "I will protect my home," Korath replied. "This ship has been my prison, but it has also been my home. These people have been my captors, but they have also been my companions. I choose to fight." The dragon launched itself through the ship's launch bay and into space. Without the collar's limitations, Korath moved with a grace and power that amazed everyone watching. The creature was magnificent, its scales catching starlight as it flew between the enemy ships. The Scarith fleet had never faced a free star dragon before. Their weapons were designed to fight ships and soldiers, not an ancient creature that moved like living lightning. Korath tore through their formation, disabling ships with precision strikes that avoided killing the crews. From the bridge of the Crimson Talon, Queen Zarathul watched in awe. This was what Korath had always been capable of, but the collar had held it back. The dragon fought not with mindless fury, but with intelligence and strategy. "The enemy fleet is retreating," Commander Vex reported with amazement. "They cannot match Korath's speed and agility." The battle was over in minutes. The Scarith ships fled into hyperspace, unwilling to face a creature they could not understand or defeat. Korath returned to the ship, settling gently in the launch bay. Queen Zarathul and Jake went to meet the dragon. Korath's eyes were bright with satisfaction, but also with something else: gratitude. "Thank you," the dragon said to both of them. "For 30 years, I forgot what it felt like to choose my own actions. You gave me back my freedom, and I chose to use it to protect those I care about." The queen felt tears in her golden eyes. "I thought freedom meant losing control, but it actually means gaining something more valuable: trust." Jake smiled. "And that is what I tried to tell you. Sometimes the strongest bonds are the ones that people choose for themselves." Over the following days, word of what had happened spread throughout the ship and beyond. The crew members who had witnessed Korath's free choice to defend them began to look at their human guest with new respect. They also began to question their own assumptions about strength and leadership. Queen Zarathul offered Jake his freedom and safe passage back to human space. But she also offered him something else: a position as advisor to help her rebuild the Valeth Empire on new principles. "I want to learn more about this thing you humans call diplomacy," she said. "I want to understand how to build alliances instead of just conquering enemies." Jake accepted the offer. "It will not be easy. Your people have been thinking one way for centuries. Change takes time." "All worthwhile things take time," the queen replied. "But I think we have a good teacher." Korath, now free but choosing to stay, became a symbol of the new direction for the Valeth Empire. The dragon's choice to protect rather than flee showed other species that change was possible. Even for the most unlikely beings, the queen began reaching out to other races, not as a conqueror but as someone seeking to understand. Some rejected her overtures, suspicious of Valeth motives, but others, intrigued by the stories of a star dragon choosing freedom and still protecting its former captors, agreed to talk. Jake found himself at the center of these negotiations, helping both sides understand each other. His simple wisdom and practical approach to problems made him valuable in ways he had never imagined. One evening, As Jake stood in the dragon's chamber watching Korath rest peacefully, Queen Zarathul joined him. "Do you ever regret leaving your home to help us?" she asked. Jake thought about the mining colony where he had been captured. It seemed like a lifetime ago. "I miss my old life sometimes. But I think this is where I am supposed to be." "Someone wants tea?"